Welcome to the Freshman Foundation Podcast, helping you make the jump from high school athletics to the collegiate level and beyond, with your host, Michael Huber.
Hey everyone, it's Mike Huber, founder and CEO of the Freshman Foundation and certified mental performance consultant. The Freshman Foundation helps young athletes be ready for every next step in the game of life through mental performance coaching. Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to tell you about the upcoming Freshman Foundation digital course. The course is designed specifically to help high school athletes be ready for the challenging transition to college athletics. It's something that I've been working on for a number of years. We will teach the critical skills that I've identified through the research conducted from interviews on this podcast and through academic research on the topic of athletic transitions. The course will be available on August 1st, 2023. Stay tuned to the podcast for updates on the course or join our community by visiting my website, michaelvhuber.com. Thank you for listening to the Freshman Foundation Podcast. Welcome to the Freshman Foundation, a podcast that helps young athletes be ready for every next step in the game of life. How has Andrew Trimble applied his experiences on the rugby pitch to found a successful sports technology company? In this episode, we're honored to host Andrew Trimble, a former professional rugby player turned founder and CEO of Kairos Sports Technology. From overcoming personal challenges to building a successful company, Andrew guides us through his interesting and valuable journey. Stay with us as we navigate his remarkable transition from sports to entrepreneurship. Let's build your foundation with Andrew Trimble. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. We met in Toronto at the Leaders Conference, which was really my first time there. It was really a great event. So just tell me about your background in sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That occasion in Toronto was a good opportunity. It's always a good opportunity to meet different people and different stakeholders and different people who are at the event for different reasons. And actually, it's probably been one of the things I've noticed about since I finished playing rugby professionally. It's a very unusual environment, and when you come out of that environment, you realize how one-dimensional that environment is. And in a lot of ways, it's exactly what you need to be a high performer, or perform at your best. But in a lot of ways, it's an unhealthy environment, and you come out of that and you meet different types of people from all over the world doing different types of things, and life is much richer when you come out of it, and you have a new kind of appreciation of it. And meeting yourself and a number of other people at the event is probably an example of that. But anyway, that was a quick tangent, or one of my kind of realizations since coming out of that environment. But so I grew up playing rugby. I was in a rugby playing family. My dad made that very clear. I was interested in football and soccer when I was a youngster, and I had a soccer annual or sticker book, and he confiscated it at one stage and replaced it with an Irish rugby annual. And at that stage, I knew this isn't up for grabs. I'm in a rugby family, and I was going to be a rugby player. And fortunately for me, I was quite good at it, and it allowed me to go on and kick on. And I was always a rugby fan. It was always plan A for me. I kind of studied and stuff, and I was interested in a few other things, but it was always rugby for me. I always wanted to do that, and I was lucky that kind of dream came true for me. And gradually, there's kind of traditional pathways into pro rugby in Ireland, and it tends to typically be through the school system, slightly less now, and it used to be more so, certainly whenever I was growing up. And 16, 17, I kind of had quite a large, uncoordinated frame as a kind of youngster, and kind of grew into that. And there was a bit of athleticism, and I kind of kicked on. And as I started to perform well, I got more and more confident and started to perform well on the right occasions, whenever the right coaches and selectors were watching. And that allowed me to kick on and play for Ireland schools, play for Ulster in Ireland under 21s. Then I got a development contract. There was a coach at Ulster, the team that I played for my whole career, who I'm really thankful to, because I was quite a shy young fella. he identified that, and he knew that I needed to be exposed to that environment from an early age. I needed to get used to it. I needed to find my feet and be myself in that environment. And so he put me in the deep end probably earlier than I should have been in there, by merit anyway. And he put me in there, and it was the best thing for me, because within a quicker kind of turnaround, I was able to be myself socially. I was able to be myself with ball in hand in terms of my performance and what I was doing, and in training, everything. I just settled in and found my rhythm quite quickly. I played in the league for Ulster, and then I played in the European Cup for Ulster, which was a step up, and then I played in the autumn internationals when I just turned 21 for Ireland, and all across the way, it was an amazing experience for me. I was in an Ulster team that was captained by my hero growing up, David Humphreys. I had a picture of him on the wall when I was 15, and then I got to play against Australia, the first game, straight in the deep end, real high level international rugby straight up. And I was playing number 13. For any of your listeners who aren't rugby fans, they still might be. They might know the name Brian O'Driscoll, an Irish rugby legend, one of the best players that's ever played the game. And when you think of Irish rugby, you think of Brian O'Driscoll. He was injured that autumn, and I was playing 13. I replaced the great Brian O'Driscoll, and I was feeling the pressure. So it was an amazing experience, and kicked on from there. And it certainly wasn't straight, plain sailing from there. There was a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of injuries, a lot of difficulties, a lot of non-selection, a lot of success, a small bit of success towards the end of my career. But it was an amazing time, and it taught me a lot, and a lot of that I'm probably channeling into life after rugby, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I want to ask you about, because there's a lot there. Obviously, you've had a really, really long and robust career. So at what point did you know in your adolescence or in your life that you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at rugby?
I'd say it was probably, I got like kind of an increased kind of realization, a few sort of realizations. I can cope at this level and thrive at this level. And in school, I loved schools rugby, because it's the schools and under 21s rugby, underage rugby is the best rugby you'll ever play, because it's guys your age, obviously, and you have the same interests, and it's fun. It's absolutely fun. It turns professional, but gets a bit serious. It gets a bit intense, and it gets high levels of expectation and intensity and expectations from coaches and supporters and everything. But at schools level, it's got that enough. It's serious enough to be high performance, but it's still fun, and it's still lads playing with their mates that you went to school with, and that's the pureness of sport. And playing Irish schools, or kind of schools rugby in Ireland, I definitely felt like if I got the ball in my hands, I was going to beat defenders. I felt like I was going to be dominant. I felt like I was just confident, always wanted the ball, always wanted to thrive and kind of show what I was capable of doing. It was a great feeling. And then, like anything else, you're a big fish in a small pond. And then once you go up a level, then you start to realize, this is not as easy as it was a year ago. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself and discover a way to differentiate and show what you're capable of there. So I did that a couple of times, and then once I kind of figured it out, then you get, okay, I can cope here, I can do well here. There's definitely moments in my career personally where I felt like I was behind. I kind of kicked on with a level of athleticism and kind of natural ability and natural flair, and then guys who are 3, 4, 5 years younger than you, they kick on, and then they go through that purple patch, and you have to find something different. I actually changed positions whenever I was 21, 22, and it was a new skill set, and I had to kind of find my feet again and think my way into a game rather than just relying on natural ability. So there was a couple of kind of realizations along the way, but in terms of personally what I wanted, it was always rugby. I always wanted to play professionally. I always wanted to play for Ireland. I was a rugby fan growing up, and that opportunity meant the world to me.
Yeah. So you met, well, I guess the first question is, when did you sign a contract with Ulster? How old were you?
I was um, I was 20 whenever I signed my first contract. Now, now, anybody who's listening, kind of they're familiar with American sports. I mean, what I was getting paid as a professional, um, there was guys working at the shop getting paid more than me, but as far as I was concerned, I was a professional and I had landed, and I told all my friends I was a pro rugby player. So at 20 years old, it was a great opportunity for me, and it was an opportunity to kick on and make a life of this, and make a career is something I loved.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you had a coach who really took you under his wing, mentored you. So like at what point when you joined the club did that happen?
So the coach actually ended up he got sacked from my team. So he was there. He had a period of success for a couple of years, and then a period where results didn't go our way. Supporters turned against him, and he got sacked for one reason or other. I'm not sure exactly what the politics were behind the scenes, but he went elsewhere. He went to one other club and then moved on to Saracens in London. His name is Mark McCall, and now he's got a whole load of success with Saracens, won European Cups, Premierships, everything. And I think he would probably say that he had a tough period at Ulster, probably learned a lot. And then now, I mean, I think Ulster supporters are probably going, how on earth did we let this guy go? He's one of the greatest coaches there is out there. And he may not have been then. I don't know, but certainly there was certainly the raw ingredients of what he is now. And this is probably just an example of how he had a intuition maybe as a coach. Certainly that was the skill set that, the story I'm describing here now. He identified that I was shy. He identified that I was kind of in my shell a little bit. I wasn't quite being myself. I wasn't comfortable in that environment. And he told me a story, and you said he mentored me. He didn't really mentor me. He just spotted this about me and made this decision on my behalf, and allowed me that opportunity. But I think we were doing a workshop with the Ireland under-20s, and he was brought in. He was doing a small bit of coaching, under-21s it was at the time, and he spotted me just not contributing to the group, and he knew I had things to say, but I wasn't saying them. I wasn't backing myself. I just wasn't exhibiting the confidence. Wasn't backing myself, and I wasn't, just showing that confidence that he thought that I should have had, I suppose. And he said he just watched me, and he just watched me just sit there and not piping up whenever I should have been. And he identified that he needs to be in this environment more often. He needs to be here. He needs to be here every day so that he gets used to this, so that he can start to be himself, because we need him to be himself if he's going to thrive, if he's going to kick on. So yeah, he gave me a contract, a development contract. It was kind of semi-professional contract at the time, and that was ahead of my time. I didn't deserve it. No, I wasn't performing badly. I would have been in the mix for a couple of guys who would have got a contract, but he gave me that because he thought I was underachieving. I needed to be in the environment to get the best out of myself. What a brilliant bit of insight for him to spot that. And within a couple of years, I felt like I repaid that confidence. By the time I repaid that confidence, he was probably gone somewhere else. So I repaid it to a different coach, unfortunately, from his perspective. But I thought that was a really interesting experience, my experience. And I'm very, very thankful that he, made that decision on my behalf and allowed me the opportunity that I otherwise wouldn't have had.
Absolutely. So when that happened, like, how did it make you feel? Like, was there a transformation there for you, knowing that he was sort of invested in sort of your development and spotting that maybe deficiency that you had to improve on?
Yeah, he seemed to, he picked up things about me that I think whenever he mentioned them, I would have acknowledged that I knew that about myself, but I wouldn't have been really that self-aware. And again, this is a time everybody's self-aware now. Everybody's self-reflective. Everybody understands and is mindful, and that's just a language that didn't exist in 2004, right. 2005. I suppose it took me back then. The culture and the environment was pretty old school. It was a little bit old-fashioned. The opinion of everybody in the changing room is actually the opinion of one alpha male. or maybe a couple of people who are kind of in that circle, and very old fashioned, reasonably unhealthy, I would say, but everybody had it, and there's kind of different levels of unhealthiness, I suppose. But that was an environment where it took me a long time to kind of find my feet and find my confidence and find my voice and really back myself. And I think that environment in rugby changing rooms or professional sport changing rooms has changed dramatically for the better. Even by the time I was finishing, there were young fellas coming through, characters, different types of people from different types of backgrounds and challenging people. And it was just very, very good to see, the traditional alpha male in the room wasn't necessarily the one calling the shots by the time I finished, which was a really good place to be. But yeah, so it took me, I'd say probably I didn't speak to anybody for the first 6 months. It just took me a while. I was shy, and it just took me a while to find my feet and come out of my shell. And when I did that, it was very good for me personally to grow, and very good for me from a rugby perspective to be able to thrive and be myself and fulfill potential.
Yeah. So were there, aside from having that shyness and ultimately working through it and developing and sort of moving past it, were there any other challenges that you could sort of identify that were big ones in that process of going through the system as you were sort of growing through the club?
I identified things about myself. I was shy. I was also quite nervous. I probably had a little bit of imposter syndrome on game night. I always felt like tonight's going to be the night everybody finds out that I've been lucky numerous times to get me into this position. These are this sort of demons, and I'm sure this happens over and over again. Lots of people who I speak to experience something similar. So for me, acknowledging that and coming up with tools to manage that, and tools to go out and ultimately, I suppose, impress my game and be myself out there, and almost like force behaviors that allowed me to be the best version of myself. Just it kind of standard sports psychology and standard kind of preparation and routines. And ultimately I never enjoyed game day. Always thought there's more to lose than there is to gain. I was talking earlier on about the pureness of playing schools rugby with your mates, playing for fun. Once you get turned professional, that kind of goes out the window a little bit. You play for a job. You're expected to perform. There's an intensity and expectation around that, and sometimes it's hard to I suppose fulfill what's expected from you. So I always I was always nervous about that. So that's probably, I'm sure they're connected. My shyness as a young fella, and struggling with the expectation and the nerves around game night.
Yeah, I don't think any of that is uncommon, regardless of geography, sport, developmental level. I think for a lot of athletes, the norm is to feel that way, right? Like I don't belong, or if I don't perform, there's sort of a worst case what if, right? You're always sort of worried about that. But I think you talk about sports psychology. I think ultimately, regardless of where you're at, like you do have a choice mindset wise to sort of, accept the situation you're in and try to make the most out of it. And I think for a lot of athletes looking back, myself included, I think we all put probably more pressure on ourselves than we needed to. But without the guidance from somebody to help you sort of put things into perspective, a lot of times you're sort of left to fend for yourself. Did you ever have access to sports psychology services, to mental coaches that maybe helped you with it while you were playing?
Yeah, I did. There was, and again, this would have been back in the days whenever it wouldn't have been normal, really. I'm talking about it was in the dark ages. It was 15 years ago, I suppose.
Big difference.
Yeah. And there were definitely, there was one fella came on tour, and I eventually got to the point where I was a little bit skeptical as well. I naturally find a groove, and I naturally find coping mechanisms and ways to just to convince myself or remind myself how good I could be, and convince myself to be excited about performance, not daunted by performance. And I remember myself and a teammate used to say to each other be brave just before kickoff. Be brave out there. Call for the ball. Get the ball in your hands. Make sure take defenders on. Don't shift the ball into someone else's hands who's in no better position than you are. And my dad constantly telling me, back yourself. You have to back yourself. So yeah, there's definitely the little coping mechanisms you develop yourself, and then from speaking to a couple of people, one was he wasn't a sports psychologist, he was a video analyst, sorry, and he just knew, he's just a rugby nerd, like he absolutely knew his Irish rugby inside out, knew everything, like all the strengths of all the different wingers, and he knew what I was good at, and he knew how to get the best out of me. So yeah, there was a number of kind of cues there, but that was more from a coaching perspective. And then the sports psychologist, I identified that in team meetings, you know how you get like a coach would say, ask what seems a little bit like a rhetorical question, but it's actually not a rhetorical question. He's asking for either an obvious answer or an answer that some people should know. And there was a number of different times in meetings I find myself, he's asking something and I'm going, is that obvious? Like, I know the answer to that. I know the answer to that question. I don't answer a rhetorical question. You just look stupid in front of your mates. But it wasn't rhetorical, and it actually wasn't as obvious as I thought it was. And it turns out I tactically and strategically, I knew the messages he was trying to deliver. So I understood the game very well. And I just sort of realized, why am I always worried about what people think, or worried about, and I explained this to the sports psychologist, and he said, just say something, and I had seen guys from other teams just saying stuff and getting kind of currying favor with coaches and getting, just being well received, and then, but I was smarter than that, and I could see, and I could contribute more value than some of the guys as well, and I was just frustrated with himself that they would say something like, oh, I was going to say that, and that idiot just took my answer,
right. Yeah, I mean, but I think you raise a really important point, and in terms of the value of working with somebody who's in the sports psychology profession, because I think because so many athletes tend to be in their head, right? And they're afraid to make a mistake, that they don't speak up because they don't want to look stupid, right? Or whatever you want to call it. When you talk to somebody who's in the mental performance field like myself, what I find is a lot of athletes sense relief because they can speak freely and they're actually getting practice in terms of speaking up in front of somebody they can trust in most cases. And then the person feeds back, like myself, can feedback perspective. Like, what if you answer the question that way? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? When someone else says, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? When someone else says it to you, it's like, oh, that makes complete sense. When you say it to yourself, it's like, no, the worst thing that's going to happen is going to be, I'm going to get sacked. Right. Like, because I don't want to, they're going to cut me because I'm going to seem like a dummy, or I'm going to speak up. You know what I'm saying? So like, having that relationship with somebody that you completely trust, who also doesn't control, your playing time, the personnel, is also a huge factor, because you're always worried about what your coach is going to think of you and how's that going to affect my time on the field. Yeah.
And I always worried about what my teammates thought. That was my biggest thing. And I remember, I'm sure we'll get on to this, but there was kind of a purple patch at the end of my career. And I felt like I didn't quite fulfill potential up until I turned 29. And I had the season of my life, I had like a couple of years where everything just aligned perfectly. And I really understood what made me tick. And the other side of this is, nothing meant more to me than my teammates saying to me, you had a blinder tonight, things went really well, fair play, congratulations, and hugs, and high fives. And nothing meant as much to me. Not family, not journalists, not the coach, not anybody apart from the guys on the pitch with me. It always meant more to me than anything else, what they thought. But then the problem with that, and that's all well and good, all wholesome, but the problem with that is, if they thought I was an idiot, it was the most devastating thing ever. And I got more comfortable after those kind of one-on-ones and those challenging conversations with the sports psychologist. I did, find my voice and find an ability just to say, and I definitely did let myself down once or twice. But to your point, what was the worst could happen? You look a bit stupid for a minute or two, but people forget about that. No one's telling those stories now. At least I haven't heard anybody telling the story about me saying something stupid at a team meeting.
Right. Well, there's 2 points there for me. One is nobody really cares that much about what you do, right? We think that others care way more about us than they really do, right? I think that's in any walk of life. Forget about, right? That's one thing. The other thing is too, the question I'll always ask an athlete is like, would you ever talk to a teammate the way you talk to yourself? And invariably the answer is no. Meaning, even if you look stupid or you make a mistake or you have a terrible game, you're going to be harder on yourself than they are, right? They're probably going to come up and pat you on the back and say, "Hey, get him next time. It's all right." And you're thinking that, they're going to excommunicate you. And that's just not really the way it works in most cases. Maybe once in a while, but it's not it, right? But we convince ourselves that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, we think we are we think we're the center of the universe. We think it's a Truman Show. Like we think like everybody here, they're all going to remember every stupid thing I've done. And you're right. The humbling element of this, the lesson we can learn is we're forgettable. Like people don't really care about us as much as we care about us.
Well, listen, and there's a couple of things in there that I want to draw because I think it's really important, right? Because really what you've described is, listen, athletes, the most elite athletes have a large but healthy ego, right? You need to, right? Otherwise, it's just a hobby. It's just purely for the love of it, right? You have to have an ego to be competitive and you've got to be really good, right? So like that fuels the athlete, but it can also work against the athlete. And then ultimately what you said at the end there is really important, and maybe it kind of transitions the conversation a bit, is like, unfortunately, everyone is replaceable and everybody is going to retire, right? And so talk about that, right? Obviously, you went through a really long career. I'm sure most people don't play as long as you played, but at what point did you start to know, hey, maybe this is coming to an end?
Actually, the time between starting to think this is coming to an end and it coming to an end was very, very short.
Really?
Yeah. And so retirement for me was, I looked forward to it. By the time I started to realize I might not have much of an option here, it was the only option I wanted anyway. So I had an extra year in my contract, and I went to our guy at my team who I knew well, and I said, "Listen, I'm kind of dropping down the pecking order here a little bit. There's a couple of things I want to do outside of rugby. What say we, come up with something that's going to work? I'll get out of here early." And, financially, whatever, let's have a look and see if we can come up with something that works. And he goes, great, brilliant. And part of me was like, oh, I kind of wanted you to argue with me.
That was too easy.
Didn't want it to be that easy. So that was kind of confirmation. And everybody's happy, came up with something that worked. And the relief for me, it was a tough kind of certainly last year. Anyway, I wasn't playing much rugby. I was a little injured in bits and pieces. Any rugby I was playing wasn't performing. It wasn't really reflecting leaving the legacy I wanted to. And I kind of fell out of love with rugby. And for me, I mentioned that purple patch. I finished when I was 33, and I had that purple patch when I was 29, 30, 31. And then very soon after, I'd say I was in my prime, really, like 18 months before I decided to finish. That's how quickly it happened. Now, I know some people would probably come to the conclusion that maybe that's a reflection. Maybe you did have the ability to get back there and you just I didn't have the stickability, or I didn't want to dig deep. I didn't have the fight, and that there's an element of truth to that. I didn't have the fight. I'd fought a number of times, been at kind of rock bottom, injuries, way down the pecking order, and I had fought 2 or 3 times to come back and get my performances back where they needed to be, or what reflected where I should be. I just didn't have it in me to fight one more time at the age of 33. And I was happy with that, but I did get some criticism from a teammate, a very honest teammate that I know very well, and he thought I should have stuck at it. There was a new coach coming the following season. I could have got back there, but I just didn't want it. I didn't want it anymore, and I was looking for, I was excited about other stuff as well. So that's where I was when I finished.
But I think, it sounds like, right, you were ready, right? The motivation wasn't there to continue to put in the amount of work, which I'm sure was, extensive, to continue to stay, right? Like, you sort of made up your mind. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see with athletes who are faced with retirement, the difference between someone who chooses to get out on their own terms and someone who's forced out. And it sounds like, I don't know, we'll get into this. I don't know if you had a specific plan or not, but like just knowing like, hey, it was time for me to move on. Even if I've got the physical ability left, if I don't have the desire, like, it's going to be really hard to be successful, to put the work in. Whereas a lot of athletes stay too long, or they try to overcome the stuff, and then when they get out, they don't know what to do with themselves. And that leads to a lot of other challenges, like, mental health and, addiction and all these other things that, athletes who are forced out, into retirement, they don't know how to cope. So at that point, did you have a plan in terms of what you wanted to do post rugby career?
I had a few ideas and a few thoughts, but I didn't have a clear, this is the direction I want to go. But regardless of what I did, I was excited about doing something different. I, for a couple of reasons, I'd mentioned to you about that I felt like I fulfilled potential late in the game. Had I not had that period where I fulfilled potential, 2014, I was in we won the Six Nations. I was the Irish Rugby Player of the Year. And then we went on. We won in South Africa for the first time. We beat the All Blacks in Chicago for the first time, and we beat Australia at home. And so South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia in one calendar year hadn't been done before. So there was a few things I was part of, and I had been part of Triple Crowns, I recall, whenever in the Six Nations, it's Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, and you have to win all three games to win the Triple Crown. I'd been part of a couple of teams that won those, but I was a passenger in those teams. I felt like I happened to be a part of it, but I didn't contribute to it, or I didn't play as big a role as I wanted to. And with those ones that I was mentioning, I was a part of it. I deserved to be there. I contributed to it. I was a part of that effort. And that made me feel the most amazing sense of achievement, because it took me a long time to get to it, that I just felt incredible. I just felt like I'd fulfilled potential. And I think having had that, a few years later, being able to retire, just knowing, it's a relief. At least I've fulfilled my potential. I haven't left anything out there. I could have done more, but I'm pleased with what I've done, and that allowed me to move on and transition in something different. And I was excited about something different anyway, and I was excited about a change of scenery, a change of environment, and I was excited about it.
So I'll go back to what you had mentioned very early in the podcast, the sort of that idea that singular focus is something that really can help an elite athlete, right? Everything is directed into the performance, and sort of you're in this isolation, sort of bubble of the club and performance. And then you get out of it, and then there's like this whole new world, which, like, you're not ready for it, but it's really can be really exciting. So can you talk about that? Like, when you sort of stepped out and you started to look for the next thing to do, like, what was that like? How did you feel when you left and then you started looking for, well, what's my next move?
Yeah, it's really weird. It's like you just discover this whole universe, and you just discover this whole version of life that you hadn't experienced before. Even just working in an office in town, getting the train, commuting, and eating whatever I wanted. Having weekends to myself, and kids are still at a good stage, and getting to hang out with them and have the crack with them and have fun, and just not have. I just remember we used to play Friday night with the club, and then all Saturday you'd be wrecked, like you'd be just beaten up. It's like you've been in a car crash. Every single weekend you play, that's the feeling. And just something just as trivial as not feeling like shit every weekend, just feeling good, feeling physically good, and having energy to do things, and and then ultimately not feeling kind of the dread of having to go in and lift weights and hit a score that's on a scoreboard in the gym on Monday morning, and having done your review, and then kind of going in, if things aren't going well, there's no worse environment Monday morning than, crisis meetings and reviewing, bad performance of the weekend, just all that anxiety and stress. And I was just going, I'm excited now. There's a certain amount of anxiety and stress about getting a new job and upskilling when you're in your mid 30s and you've got a family to look after. That comes with its own level of anxiety, but it's
Absolutely,
different.
yes.
Ultimately, the startup and getting into Kairos, which we were quite excited about, and a lot of the principles of Kairos, the communication app for pro teams, a lot of the principles of what we were looking to implement there and the value we were looking to add in there was based on what I experienced in that environment, how I understood that high performance environment, how I knew athletes wanted to be communicated to and how they didn't want to be communicated to. So I just had a rich kind of experience of that. And there's a lot of value in that, and I could channel that ultimately into a new product, a new challenge. And I had to upskill and, dramatically upskill. I had to learn how to use software technology. I had to learn how to use a CRM, and I used to have to, raise money, speak to investors, sell a product, all of this stuff. I hadn't done any of this stuff. I hadn't a clue what I was doing. And, for me, I feel really strongly that athletes certainly have the raw ingredients. If you think about athletes, you get dropped, you either get selected or dropped, you're either fit or you're injured, your highs and lows, all that stuff is just resilience. And then the game changes every 3, 4, 5 years, and you have to change. You change positions, something happens, you pick up an injury, something happens, you have to reinvent yourself, rediscover yourself. You have to be innovative on the pitch. You have to understand what makes you tick. You have to find ways socially to get on with teammates, to even just to speak to media, all this sort of stuff. It's all raw ingredients of someone who can transition into business, but that's just raw ingredients. You don't have a clue about how business works, and it's that balance that's it's challenging, but it's exciting as well.
Yeah, that's really unintentionally, that has probably been one of the biggest themes that's come out of this podcast. It wasn't my intention when I started. I didn't think about entrepreneurship as a component of this conversation. But what I've come to learn is that a lot of former athletes have the raw ingredients, to use your phrase, to be entrepreneurs because of the resilience, the ability to deal with adversity, the fact that you're putting every ounce of time, energy, and even money, finances in certain cases into this objective, this end goal, which is not guaranteed as an athlete, right? Like, somebody always has your fate in their hands to a large degree, right? You could be the best rugby player in the world, but if somebody doesn't agree with your opinion, you're not going to have a spot on the roster, right? So ultimately, you're taking all these risks emotionally and otherwise, and there's no guarantee. And that's the same thing with entrepreneurship, right? You get into it, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want to do this. I want to solve this problem, which sounds like the genesis of how Kairos started, which was like, hey, I think I can build a better mousetrap for how organizations and athletes can communicate. And so I'm going to apply what I've learned in that space and figure out how to do it, which is basically what you describe, right? All these elements of running a business, there's so many, right? You learn the hard way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the raw ingredients and what I was able to transition, the value that I had was I understood the problems. I
Right.
intimately understood the problems, and I was frustrated by the problems, communication problems in high performance environments for years. We which I found it unusual that the communication space in pro teams is just so dry. I find it interesting that I used to walk down into the gym and you'd see 5 pieces of technology immediately. There's a force plate, NOR board, gym aware, all this stuff, and then there's all these kind of nutrition shakers and all this, like 10 different supplements, and you want, right, nutrition's, they've ticked that box, they've ticked the S&C, the performance box, but upstairs in the physio room, someone rubs against the whiteboard and they wipe off 10 names, and everybody just loses their mind because no one knows what time their appointments are tomorrow. Or people are in like 15 different WhatsApp groups and they exit a group after every away game, and or there's a PDF sent out in email, from 6 months ago with some, code of conduct or some policy or some principle that guys are supposed to be accountable for. It doesn't exist. It's in an email from 6 months ago. Guys they're not listening, not paying attention. So communication space is so clumsy. I thought that's a space that we can solve some problems there, especially when you think of high performance athletes. The typical profile is single-minded, focused, that next game, that next session. Don't distract athletes with multiple group chats and, sending Google Drive links or Huddle links or Zoom links or everything. Don't use 10 different mechanisms through 5 different departments to speak to athletes. Just put it right in front of them and just make it easy for them, because all you want from that athlete is to be able to perform, score goals, score touchdowns, score tries. Just make it easy for them to do that. Just give them the information, make it 1 click rather than 10 clicks, and they will own that more. They'll be more accountable for that. So ultimately, that's what we're achieving with Kairos.
So how long has the company been in existence?
We launched the company 2018, I think. Okay. We raised some investment, some angels, friends and family, institution in Belfast. Again, that was all new to me. Didn't know how to manage a cap table, manage an investment round, all that sort of stuff. Dilution, hadn't a clue. Equity, don't know. I'd studied finance, so I understood kind of a lot of theory principles. But
right.
So we launched the company. We got a bit of support, and we got some smart engineers to build our vision and what we wanted to achieve. And we launched the system in January 21 into English soccer. By now, 2.5 years later, we've got half the Premier League use our system, senior teams, full academies, senior women's teams, across a whole kind of range of setups there. But yeah, we've managed to hit the ground running. We've added some value straight away, and then that sports network, football network in the UK is really connected. Guys leave teams, and we get opportunities elsewhere. And yeah, we're trying to launch the system in the States. That's why I saw you at the event and getting into those networks and trying to share how much value we can offer teams ultimately.
So I'm gonna ask you probably to answer a hard question, but of all the things that you had to learn or all the challenges that you faced in sort of starting the business and sort of from 2018 to today, 5 years, like what was the biggest, if you could pick one thing, what was the biggest challenge for you as a professional to run and sort of grow a business?
I'd say one of the most exciting things, but one of the things that I'd no skill set for was managing a team, and I suppose managing engineers, managing marketing team, sales team, all this kind of all of this it's just all so new to me. We're very, very lucky that we've got an amazing team, and I think the culture is something I kind of really understand, but no one really understands culture. Nobody really understands how that happens. And hopefully the kind of the conclusion we're coming to is that myself and my co-founder, hopefully the conclusion I'm coming to is accurate, that we're good people and we like the company of good people, and we have levels of kind of accountability and expectation from each other and what we expect each other to deliver. And that kind of is the seed for the kind of culture that we've developed. We very rarely lose staff members because people love what we're doing. They're really excited. With a lot of engineers that are sports fans, football fans, and they just love the story and they love being part of something that's quite exciting. So it's just, I suppose that is all foreign to me. Get more and more comfortable with it, and I'm more and more excited about it. And in a similar way, I described, whenever I had the season of my life playing rugby, and the best thing about it was sharing it with the people who their opinion meant the most to me. Whenever we get big wins and we get signed whenever we sign deals with big high profile teams, football teams, baseball teams, sharing that with the team is the most amazing thing, and us just enjoying that together and celebrating that together is one of the most exciting things, one of the most amazing things about the business.
Yeah, and I think the word, I don't think you used it, but I think the word that comes to mind when I was listening to you is trust, right? It's the same as any high performing athletic team, which is if there's not complete trust amongst the members of that team, whether it's coaching, management, athletes, right? If you don't have that trust, it's going to be really hard to operate as a cohesive unit. And it same goes for a business, which that is really hard, right? When you've got a team of people, whether it's 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, everyone's going to have a divergent interest, right? Maybe it's just a job. Maybe it's I'm here to make money and then go, right? Like to keep everybody on the same mission and the same page is really, really hard. And if you could do that and everyone's pulling in that direction and you're able to facilitate that, you probably have you've planted the seeds for something really, really special.
Absolutely. It's trust. There was an expectation from my teammates when I played. I'm going to do this. I need you to do this. Otherwise, we're both going to look stupid. And the same thing is true now. So again, I think sometimes people get carried away with the principles in sport and how they transfer to business. But certainly there's numerous principles that we've kind of stumbled across that still stand. My business partner makes fun of me because back in the day there'd be like a business principle and he would explain to me by a sporting analogy, and it got to the point where he would say, just to wind me up, he would say it's a little bit like in rugby and I just knew. I was like, shut up. Shut up. We're not having this conversation again.
So ultimately what's your vision for Kairos? What's the vision for the business?
We want to work with as many high performance teams as possible. We want to work with as many kind of big logos as possible, big teams. We feel like we have something that's going to dramatically enhance the environment. So the practical version of Kairos, but the practical benefit is time. We're just going to save staff members time. We're going to save players time because they're not going to have to be looking around for information. It's going to be right there in their hand, there and then. So we're going to literally save them hours a week, staff members hours a week. But that's not that sexy. It's quite good. We're saving them time, but it's not the big sexy story that we're telling. The big sexy story is, and we heard this feedback from the early days, Kairos removes the lazy questions from athletes. And you'll know what I mean by lazy questions. It's athletes who can find the information out somewhere. It sits somewhere buried in their phone, but they just ask a lazy question. What time's the bus again tomorrow? Or what color jerseys are we in, blue or red? This kind of stuff that they can find out somewhere else. So if they don't ask those lazy questions anymore, then they are more accountable for the information that's in their app. The information is more accessible. They can get it easily. They know where it is. If they're more accountable for it, they own it more. If they're exhibiting more ownership over the information that's being shared, then we're actually demonstrating more conscientious athletes, a cultural impact. So ultimately, we're challenging and impacting the culture of the teams that we're working with. Yes, we're saving them time, and there's a business case around time saved for expensive athletes and staff members. But the really cool story is that we're allowing athletes to understand themselves better, understand what makes them tick, and then be more bought into the plan that the coaches implement. I always think an unhealthy high-performance environment is whenever coaches tell athletes what to do. Whenever athletes are part of that story and they contribute and they communicate back and forth and they come up with a plan together, they're way more bought into that. So hopefully, ultimately, that's what Kairos can do.
So that's... I love that you sort of finished on that point, because that's something that's kind of a real deep interest of mine in sports psychology, which is the concept of creating a self-determined motivation for the athlete, right? The perception that the athlete has control over what happens and that they're involved and they have a say, rather than being told what to do all the time, because then it creates this sort of resentment or this lack of accountability, because someone else is either telling them what to do and it's frustrating or it's disappointing or making them angry, or they're just tuning out because they don't have the incentive to actually take responsibility. Either way, right? Like giving them a stake in that situation where they have to manage their time is going to be a good thing, and it's going to spill over into other areas like performance, into how they carry themselves outside of the club, all those things, right? Now you're creating, to your point, a culture of involvement, of collaboration versus it being, top-down management.
Yeah, I mean, if I go to my kids and say, here's what we're going to do, there's very little chance that we're going to do that because they've got their own ideas. Now, there's occasions whenever I have to try and trick them into saying what I want them to say, to be fair. But I just think people in general, if they feel like they're contributing to a plan, they're a part of the plan, it's their plan, they own it way more and they execute better on it.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, the final question I'll ask is the final question I ask everybody on this podcast. So given your experiences, like what's the one piece of advice that you might give to an athlete who's looking to the future, right? They know that their time is coming, and they're looking to make that move to the next phase of life. Like, what's the piece of advice you'd give to that person?
Is this kind of like a punchy finish? Because I've got something a little bit long-winded.
Go for it. No, go for it.
The practical advice I would give is, and my experience of this was I studied, I did an undergrad theology, I did a postgrad management, and I did a master's in finance. So I studied loads. I wish I'd done more practical. I got more practical experience. I wish I'd use my network. All of a sudden, whenever you stop playing rugby, people stop wanting to speak to you. That is your sweet spot. Whenever you're playing, there's fans of the game working in businesses in town and they want to spend time with you. That's the time to get in front of them and say, listen, I don't know what I want to do, but I like what you do. Can you sit down with me? Can you spend some time with me? Can I shadow you? Practically, you'll learn way more through that, through getting into the workplace and shadowing people that you're interested in what they're doing. So practically, get practical experience. The other piece of advice I would give is, and based on my experience, I find it hard to back myself, as we were discussing earlier on. Mm-hmm. It was a key skill that I had to develop on the pitch to be able to back myself, and I eventually backed myself. I found something that worked. I understood myself, and I managed to get to the point where I was able to execute well enough to reflect the level of performance that I expected from myself. I also studied. Whenever I was telling you there about studying, I didn't have any finance background. I kind of coerced my way into getting on the course, managed to do it, and did really well eventually. And I had no experience of it, but I knew at that stage, there's 2 or 3 times. One other time I was made captain of the club, co-captain actually with one of the other guys, obviously. And I had no experience of captaining a team, leading a team. We didn't have a successful season, but I know personally I developed a load that year. I learned more about myself. I understood how to save my voice. I knew how to communicate key messages to deliver to the team and hopefully get the best out of the team. We didn't have a vintage season by any means, but I learned a load about myself, and I learned that I was capable of leading and being a captain. So again, those 3 things. Things that I'm not necessarily that good at, but I can start something new and back myself. And if I back myself, I can deliver value. So same thing, I had to really harness that mindset whenever I finished. So my ultimately long way around saying my advice is absolutely back yourself. Go out there and back yourself. Say yes to everything. Take on any opportunities, because you don't know what you might stumble across. You might discover a skill that you've just been sitting on, or you haven't realized you're good at this because you've just been playing sport for 10 years. Back yourself, take on any opportunity, because you might discover something. And I know hopefully that's the way you get the best out of yourself.
That's great. I mean, I appreciate you sharing all of your story, your insight, your knowledge. I think your background is exactly who we're speaking to on the podcast. So Andrew, thank you for coming on and spending a little bit of time to talk to me. It was great to see you again, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Good man, Michael. Thanks a lot for having me on. Enjoyed that.
Thank you. Our conversation with Andrew Trimble, a former professional rugby player turned entrepreneur, illuminates the importance of self-confidence, mentorship, and adaptability in both the athletic and business worlds. So, what was your biggest takeaway from my conversation with Andrew? My biggest takeaway is that the lessons learned on the sports field are not restricted to that realm. They transcend into the business world and beyond. Andrew's journey from overcoming personal hurdles such as shyness and self-doubt to starting his own company is a testament to the resilience and determination athletes embody. His approach in cultivating trust and accountability in his team lays the foundation for a thriving venture. We're incredibly thankful to Andrew for sharing his journey and wisdom with the Freshman Foundation community. Learn more about Kairos sports technology at kairostech.io. You can follow Andrew on Instagram at Andrew Trimble 1414. To be ready for your next step in the game of life through mental performance coaching, visit michaelvhuber.com. We look forward to welcoming you back for episode 64.
Mike Huber is the founder and owner of Follow the Ball Coaching, located in Fairhaven, New Jersey. He is a mental performance coach and business advisor dedicated to serving athletes just like you reach their full potential on and off the court. The Freshman Foundation is all about helping you get to the next level. For more information, follow along on Instagram at the Freshman Foundation. Please subscribe, give us a like on iTunes, Spotify, leave a review, tell a friend. And most importantly, come back in 2 weeks, ready to get better.